happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 354 for Wednesday, June the 25th, 2025. My name is Wes Fryer. I am coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, where we are finally getting our heat wave broken by some rain, and I think it's dropped the temperature about 20 degrees. And I am a middle school and sometimes high school media literacy and STEM teacher. Actually teaching 2 summer classes right now and 1 more next week. And so I've been back at school, which is a little different, but it's been great. And I am joined as always by the EdTech Yoda of the North that I'm sure that everyone knows about. Everyone west of the Mississippi essentially bows down to this man. And his name is Jason Neiffer. And he is coming to us from, I think, Missoula. But where are you tonight, Dr. Neiffer?
You know, Wes, I don't really need ChatGPT to be sycophant to me because I have your intro every week. Good evening from lovely Great Falls, Montana, where I'm joining you from my parents' house. And because we have to talk about weather on this podcast. Sunday night, I saw snow driving home to Missoula, and then today it was 86 degrees here. So we've seen both extremes in Montana in the last couple of days.
Very good. Well, I apologize that my hair is kind of weird. I don't know. I've been experimenting with cameras. This is the green screen of StreamYard. So anyway, have you guys had the heat wave? Because it's been a pretty big heat dome, and I guess mainly the east, but
I think this is just regular old Montana heat and not the heat wave, because we did have snow on Sunday night, and in fact it was this morning when I drove back over to Great Falls from Missoula. It's about 2.5 hour drive over a mountain pass, and I did see 37 degrees at one point on my dashboard. So, and then right now it's 76 in Great Falls right now. I got up to 84 today, and luckily it's going to be a little cooler the next couple of days. But yeah, we're definitely seeing an increase in temperatures.
Yeah, Peggy says it's only 99 in Phoenix right now. So how wonderful to have you with us live, Peggy. It's great. We have been in and out of the podcast studio, and it's good to be here. So what are we going to do this evening, Dr. Neiffer?
Well, Wes and I read the tech news frequently and often, and we like to shoot it through the old education prism to see if we can't help spark discussions in the larger educational community about technology and its impact on education. You can actually see all these links, including the ones we don't get to, although tonight we have just a select few, although I'm guessing that a couple of these are just downright rabbit holes for us to jump down. But you can go to our website, edtechsr.com/links, where you can see everything we talk about, plus a lot of the stuff we don't get to on any given week. And tonight we have AI stories, social media stories, some security and surveillance information, some free speech stories, miscellaneous. And then we will end tonight with our so-called Geeks of the Week. And Dr. Fryer, since you jumped in and did so many links tonight, is there a place you'd like to start?
Okay, for the record, I think we both jumped in 10 minutes before the show, and I was just copying and pasting a little faster. Okay. Oh, gosh, where do we want to start? So there's some political stuff here. Let's just talk about a positive one. Flickr. This is under miscellaneous. So this is from the Flickr blog. Creative Commons 4.0 has arrived. This is from June 18th. And I mean, the first thing I want to recognize here is I am absolutely overjoyed that Flickr is one of these Web 2.0 platforms that since the late 90s, probably early 2000s, I don't know exactly when I started using Flickr, is still around. And one of the things that I was pleased with many things that I learned teaching AP computer science principles for our high school students this past semester was that Creative Commons was part of the curriculum, at least in the modules that we were using. And I think that's very, very important to help students get a better understanding of copyright, fair use, what Creative Commons is, etc. So if you're not familiar, Creative Commons allows you to license upfront the reuse of your media materials And gosh, I don't know how many images. I've been blogging actually a little bit more lately. And I am in the habit of putting my images on Flickr. So only 53,227 photos there to date. So yeah, most of them licensed with Creative Commons. So glad to see that. Glad to know that at least students in some classes are learning explicitly about Creative Commons as well as copyright. And that's real positive. That doesn't get us very political tonight. So are you a Flickr user, Dr. Knifer? And what do you do with your photos? Because I know that you've got a lot of good big sky country pictures.
I do, yeah, including this one is a good example of that, my background tonight. But I Google Photos. Actually, that's not entirely true. It's Google Photos and it's Apple Photos as well. And so it backs up to both of them. At some point, I'm going to get, because I'm paying for both extra storage in Google and in Apple, and at some point, I really need to narrow down to just one of the two. And I'm assuming that retirement is not all that far away from me, and that will need to be a retirement strategy to economize the tech tools that I use. But yeah, so far that's been a pretty good strategy for me. What I would say is that I always think I'm going to go and try to save my photos or organize them or delete the numerous duplicates or whatever. But I get a feeling that I will leave this earth with hordes of really, really, really disorganized photos.
Yes. Well, I guess my main encouragement to everybody would be to back them up multiple places.
Yeah.
I have had the opportunity, sadly, to hear from a number of Facebook users in the past year, in part because I was wrongly, kicked off of Facebook for about a month because of this 10-year-old post that supposedly violated community standards, yada, yada. And we've talked about that on the show before. Got restored through a family friend who works for Facebook. But people have contacted me because I've shared about that on Reddit and elsewhere. Like, can you please help me? And, families that have taken pictures of their child, and they're 2 now, and everyone was on Facebook, and now they can't get them because they're off of Facebook. And so anyway, Flickr is wonderful. It's great to have these places to share and back up. In addition, I don't publish every photo I take on Flickr, but all the photos I do take are backed up to the Apple iCloud as well as to Google Photos. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we have redundant backups, because stuff happens and it would be a real wounding event to lose access to literally the thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of digital photos that we have collected over the years now.
Well, and what I would say too is that one of my most prized possessions is I have a little shoebox of photos from when I was growing up, and it's kind of my family's. We kept albums, but a lot of the best shots were in this yellow shoebox, basically that I ended up with. That I scanned all those photos, but yeah, I think that. Especially as boomers start to age and eventually leave us, that what happens to photos is a really interesting question that I don't think we have great answers to yet. Because if you set up your account, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and left the earth, Allison is set up to be my backup. You can do that in Apple and Google, so you can go in and get all my stuff. If you have loved ones that are passing on, or in fact, do it before they pass on. Have conversations with them about, can you be a backup for someone, or maybe put them on a large flash drive and give them to a trusted relative. And I do worry a little bit about the extraordinary amount of personal data that isn't set up well to survive us.
Absolutely. I just dropped a link into the chat because I was thinking maybe I had written about the Facebook thing. This is from last December 2024, Facebook friend safety tips. So anyway, we harp on safety things often.
It's true
on the show. So yes, and Peggy, these are the Blue Ridge Mountains that are just outside of Cherokee. I took this photo about 3 weeks ago when Shelly and I were up there camping. So we got some big sky country. We got some Blue Ridge Mountain country going here. So We're not going to start singing John Denver, but we could.
I love me some John Denver, to be real frank with you. But um, let's see. Shall we maybe start jumping into less good news?
Whatever your heart desires, Dr. Knifer, we can go there.
Yeah. Let's. I don't want to jump into to AI quite yet. Why don't you do some of the free speech stuff?
Okay. I think that free speech is an extremely important topic to talk about. And in social media and mainstream media, there are some misperceptions about it. And so I put a couple different articles in here about free speech. So in fact, I think I do one of them under AI. Here's a podcast, first of all. This one was a new podcast to me. I had not heard of this before. It's called News Over Noise. And as listeners may know, I am a very enthusiastic supporter of media literacy education. We both are, actually. And so often I'm finding new media literacy podcasts. And this is an interview with Bradford Vivian, Dr. Vivian, who is the professor of communication arts and sciences at Penn State. He's written a book called Campus Misinformation: The Real Threat to Free Speech in American Higher Education by Oxford University Press. And this episode is called The Campus Free Speech Panic: Who is Fueling the Misinformation Machine? And Dr. Knifer and I both have terminal degrees. We've been around education a lot. And, he works at a university. I work at a K-12 school. There is a concerted effort to attack, education, and there has been for quite a while, especially with public education in the United States, but specifically universities. And so I found this podcast to be very, very enlightening when we think about what we want in a free society in terms of the opportunities to engage with ideas and to learn, and what we should expect at a university, which hopefully is not just indoctrination and propaganda, but it truly is a very diverse group of folks who are coming together, studying a lot of different things and talking about a lot of different things. I think this really set some of the current attacks on higher education in some real good historical contexts. And I was really, glad to hear this. And I think it's look, we have had, and I think we still do have the best higher education system in the world. And, so many different countries send their best and their brightest to the United States because we have phenomenal universities. And anyway, so that's the topic. It touches on free speech and free speech panic. I think that we need to have limits on free speech, but at the same time, we need to have robust and vibrant universities. And vibrant universities are going to mean all kinds of different voices that are speaking. And we really have a very worrying attack that continues. So recommend this podcast, and specifically that episode. I'm happy to jump into another free speech one if you want to pass on commentary.
Yeah, here I will tell you one thing. Say one thing to this. I went to a small, private, relatively conservative Catholic college for my undergraduate degree, and I went there largely because I got a debate scholarship. But I will tell you, I was exposed to an extraordinary number of points of view from the professors on that campus, and I feel like it made me smart. That's
yeah. 100%. And Jason and I both participated in intercollegiate debate. Jason a lot more in high school than I did, but 4 years in college for both of us, and just phenomenal opportunities to engage with ideas, be challenged, and then to become aware of stuff, right? I went to the Air Force Academy and I read stuff Karl Marx wrote. We need to be studying all kinds of different ideas, especially if we're going to have informed and articulate ideas to respond when these kind of things come up politically or just in conversation. This one was really, really sobering. And we have talked on the show about customs and going through customs and what kinds of risks that we can have with our devices when we go through customs, because customs is kind of a I guess if no man's land is what it's called, no person's land. What's the politically correct way to say that? I don't know. No man's land is a place where the authorities, the customs officials, have a large amount of authority over you, and they can search your phone and they can, do all kinds of things. It's been over 5 years now, I think, since I last was out of the country in Egypt. But this is an article from the New Yorker called "How My Reporting on the Colombia Protests Led to My Deportation," and it's by Alistair Kitchen. It's from June 19th, 2025, and he's an Australian who, as a student in the United States, had written about demonstrations that were taking place in Colombia. And when he later, after he had left the university, was flying from Los Angeles to Melbourne, he, ended up getting, flying to Los Angeles from Melbourne. He got pulled out of the line, and he got detained for a while, and then he got deported. And the agents told him it was explicitly for the writing and reporting that he had done on Substack, which he felt like a lot of people might not even have been reading, but evidently the government was reading. And so, something to know, and Jason and I have been aware of this for some time. I mean, every word that we say in this podcast is being not only recorded and archived to YouTube, and that's by choice, we're choosing to do this, but it's being transcribed, and it is also being read by AI, by artificial intelligence, large language models. And so the United States government today, in my perception, and I do not have any security clearances or special access to anything, it's just my reading of public media. The United States government today is utilizing artificial intelligence algorithms and platforms to an unprecedented degree. And of course, they're more powerful. And so anything that we say publicly and that is certainly put on the internet is going to be potentially used against us in different kinds of scenarios. And so it is really chilling to see what is happening across many aspects of our society and culture today. We are not a political show, not to explicitly go into that, but we are a technology show. And we talk a lot about technology, and we talk about the ways that technology not only impacts us in the classroom, but it can also, affect us with identity theft, with our, personal, finances, with all kinds of different ways. And so Jason loves to travel. He's a much more avid traveler than I am. We think about things like phones that we take and computers that we take, and we're not, doing things that are illegal, and we're not doing things that we think are going to get us in trouble. But when we've spoken about things in particular parts of China, and we've touched on surveillance, or in this case, even if we would touch on criticizing the United States government, this is a very, very sobering article. I recommend it. It's an eye-opener. I don't know how many folks realize that, like, writing on your Substack can get you deported. And that's exactly what happened to this former Columbia student.
Yeah. And I just would note too that we just can't be afraid of opinion, right? Like I feel like it's truly very American to have divergent thoughts and points of view and opinions, and we've long embraced that. And on really all perspectives of politics. And I'm a strong believer in free speech, and I'm a strong believer that when people are in our country under our Constitution, on our hallowed ground, then they get the right to express their opinion. And of course, there's limitations to that, as we have 200 years of jurisprudence to help us through that process. But the bottom line is that free speech is core to America. It's core to Americans.
Yeah. Do you want to do the Bradford Vivian? Was that mine? Oh, I guess maybe that was mine too. No, that's yours, isn't it?
Nope, that's yours.
I did that one twice. Okay, sorry. That one. Oh, what was that one twice? That's just the second line of the same podcast. Yeah, Wes can't read a Google Doc today. I guess one that's a bit related to this is it's another podcast. I've mentioned this one before. Tech Policy Press. Really, really love this podcast. This is a post actually on there. So normally I'm listening to their podcast, but they have articles that they write as well. And this is called The High Stakes of Biometric Surveillance. And this is by Dia Kayagi, who is a fellow at Tech Policy Press. This is from June 23rd, 2025. And Jason and I, in fact, if you go on our EdTech Situation Room podcast, there is, which, heads up, doesn't have 100% of our shows, because here we are on episode 354, and 346 is the last published one. One of my summer goals is getting all of that updated because I've just fallen behind. But we have some links at the top: home, about, subscribe, links, live, and then there's one called surveillance, because at one time we were talking a lot more than we do now about security and about AI. Well, sorry, not about AI, about security and about surveillance. And that even encouraged me to do my third TEDx talk. I guess it was my second TEDx talk about digital citizenship in the surveillance state. Boy, AI, oh my gosh, allows for anyone to process through an unbelievable quantity of information and data. I remember as a technology director, we had over 100 security cameras on our 80-acre campus. And as the technology director, I was responsible for maintaining all those and working with our vendor, and all of it was what's called on-prem security footage. So we had everything on servers that was on our site. But even back then, back in the day, and this was 2005. This wasn't that old. 2015 to 2019. There were systems that if you would want to upload your data to the cloud, you could ask it questions like, tell me when a white Jeep came onto our campus, or, tell me when this license plate came on, etc. It was just amazing. And like, that was way before ChatGPT and these, platforms that we're now more familiar with as large language models. So this article, I think, really made me think deeper about biometric surveillance, meaning, like, I don't know, and we don't have to go into this, but we just had No Kings protests across the United States. We had some folks that were showing up masked there. Well, in some locations, masks have been ruled illegal, in the United States, and they were ruled illegal in, for instance, Hong Kong, during protests. Biometric data and sharing biometric data is almost impossible to avoid when you walk outside and there's, security cameras. But it is really, really important. There is bias in facial recognition platforms. There have been false arrests of individuals, particularly individuals of color. And we've got sort of a race happening with a lot of companies who are really trying to, push those things forward. This article does talk about, and I'm going to say these words, I don't know if I'm going to ever, be flying back to China or not, but anyway, the Uyghur population in Western China is most likely the population under the most incredibly severe and focused surveillance of any population in the world, of which I'm aware. And the article goes into that and talks about authoritarian uses of biometric data, not being limited to China, but the EU and the European Commission has published guidelines under their EU AI Act. They have prohibited uses of AI. There's 8 different prohibited uses, including, quote, untargeted scraping to develop facial recognition databases, i.e. Clearview AI. If you're not familiar with that, Clearview AI is utilized by probably most of the law enforcement agencies in the United States today. And then it goes on to other kinds of biometrics. So anyway, these are important issues. And one of the things that I certainly struggle with, and perhaps Dr. Neifer as well, we'll talk about these kinds of issues. Hey, there's been a big hack. Hey, millions of account credentials have been compromised. Hey, biometric surveillance is happening. What do we do about it? And so gathering as we do on an almost weekly basis to talk about these issues is helpful to process these. But then I think it's also important to consider, well, what is the policy implication of this? Should we as the United States follow in the footsteps of the European Union in different respects with regard to, laws attempting to regulate big tech companies and address things like surveillance? So any thoughts or comments about these potentially explosive and controversial topics, Dr. Neifer? Now that we've said everything you say is being recorded and could be used against you, you can just pass.
Yeah, here's what I would additionally say. Yes, and there um, it's so much bigger than the headlines today, is what I would say. And that, our what I love about the United States is that we've said over and over and over and over and over again that we can do better. We can evolve. We can be we can be a better country. And uh, the bottom line for me is that these aren't about today. It's about history and the future together, right? And so don't get stuck too much in the day-to-day headlines. Be thinking about the big picture. And that's where, and that a lot of that's the historian slash government teacher in me. But yeah, I'm a big believer that um, we have to put things in context. And a lot of what the last 10 years has been about really doesn't fit the context of and history of the United States and the way politics and discussion has typically existed. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to put it in that larger context.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to jump into the AI, or want to go for some of the social media, or what would you like to do?
Sure. Let's do social media, and then I'm assuming that AI will be a bit of a rabbit hole, as it always is.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, here's one that's a Facebook update that caught my eye. This is from yesterday on TechCrunch. Facebook group admins complain of mass bans. Meta says it is fixing the problem. And I don't know, Jason, if you have experienced any kind of suspected AI ban or moderation. I'm actually now a moderator in a pretty large Facebook group, and I'm working with that group to figure out how to meet the challenges of what happens when you have thousands of members and all kinds of folks posting things. But I think that my ban, which lasted about a month of Facebook,
Yeah.
was related to AI. Actually, my Scratch account, okay, Scratch is the MIT Media Lab block-based coding platform that I've used for like 18 years. Like in March, my account got flagged and it got suspended for a community standards violation. And I don't know if it's that you're not supposed to use your name in your Scratch account. But I've been doing that for 17 years. And so I think that they also are using some kind of algorithm to identify things. I don't know if it was a link that I put in. I don't know. And I can't talk to somebody about that. In fact, I thought about, do I, put a blog post up, or, reach out to the network to say, hey, who knows someone at Scratch? But I'm teaching a week-long coding workshop right now about Scratch, and I'm having to use a secondary account. And so anyway, this is going to continue to happen, that different groups have different community standards. And by the way, I support community standards. I think that groups, should be able to have, their own guidelines. I don't think that they should be, racially or ethnically or gender, discriminatory or things like that. But I do think that, it's important to have community guidelines and to allow them to be enforced. But one of the frustrations today is that you have these huge and massive platforms that do not give a recourse for you to talk to a human being. And that's been my experience now with Scratch, where I still have a suspended account, and it was with Facebook, where thankfully, like I had mentioned, I have a friend who has an in-law who works for the company, and was able to put my name on a list or something like that, and get things cleared up a little bit. So have you encountered anything like that, Jason, with respect to or heard of others experiencing a ban or a suspension or something like that? Because this sounded like people being, kicked out of groups, but I don't know if that also meant their accounts were banned. But my experience was, it was my whole account.
Yeah, I do know of a couple of folks that run community groups, like as in like they, like a local uh, giveaway group, people that put things on street corners. There's one for couches in Missoula, for example, that has said they've faced increased scrutiny, and they weren't entirely sure why. And I think that that's becoming more common. And what I don't really understand about that is that from everything I've read, particularly concerning Meta and its associated social media platforms, is that they're actually trying to take a lighter touch towards the um, the rules and moderating content, because that's what they were in a kerfuffle about with um, previously President Trump, and also broad criticism from conservatives. And I will say that it's not related specifically to this, but social media is starting to get a lot of, I guess, for lack of another way of putting it, overrun by junk content that's generated by AI. And that's one of the things that I don't think we talked about. Um, did we last talk about the massive amount of money that Meta is trying to fish engineers from other companies with? Did we talk about that last time?
I don't know. I think that was on Hard Fork, and it's entirely
Yeah,
possible we talked about it. So
yeah. There were several podcasts covered it, and it is a really interesting phenomenon. But the thing that is super interesting about that is that it seems like an acknowledgement that Meta understands that social media is probably going to get challenged by the current era of AI. And so for me, like I don't know, when you have a company that's that powerful, that owns that many platforms, that is trying to be in that many technology fields, um, that is a question of do they have a conflict of interest if they start to um, uh, uh, crack down on X when they may have other tools that help contribute to X, right? Or the one I heard most recently was AI's impact on Pinterest. Apparently, Pinterest is just being overrun by AI images, and part of that is that they have an algorithm that rewards a single image that you pull from a post, right? It's the reason why so many recipe sites and teachers pay teacher offerings have graphics that are very specifically designed around posting to Pinterest so they can get traffic generation that way. But now, you go type in something like gardens into Pinterest, and you're likely to get only, very overwhelming AI generated imagery. And, it seems highly unlikely that the United States is going to regulate any of these technologies, but I do think that owning a generation tool and then owning a platform tool really does have a bit of conflict of interest to it. We don't really, unfortunately, police conflict of interest much anymore, but I still think it's something we need to remain very thoughtful about.
I just dropped into the chat a March 2025 article from ZDNet. AI is ruining Pinterest. Here's why it's such a big problem. I've been seeing more ads for Facebook Meta's, AI being like integrated. It's in the tools you love. I've been hearing this in podcasts. And here I am amplifying their ad for no compensation. It's in Instagram. It's in WhatsApp. It's on Facebook. Just go ahead and utilize it. Yes, I think there's definitely a conflict of interest there. And that is this is one of the issues with big tech, right? Is companies have so much power and have, these different platforms. One more article in the social media category, and this is from Matthew Ingram. And if you don't follow Matthew, I think I learned about him when GigaOM was a going affair. And he is a very, very prolific writer, and this is an article from June 19th called "Reports of Blue Sky's Death Have Been Greatly Exaggerated." And Blue Sky, especially as the Trump administration took power and there was all kinds of stuff going on with Elon Musk and Doge and these things, a lot of stuff has happened in the last 6 months. And one of them was that a lot of folks fled Twitter and went to Blue Sky, and Blue Sky was experiencing some crazy growth. And well, that growth has apparently leveled off. But one of the things it says, Blue Sky, it says, by last November, the network had close to 15 million users. Now it has close to 36. And I think, isn't Twitter like 200 or something crazy? Yeah. There's a lot more on Twitter. One of the things that he says in this article, and in fact, it's one of the subtitles here, there will never be another Twitter. And I think that is correct. I think that we are living in a day where look, when the three of us that are on here live, Peggy, Jason, and I got onto Twitter, there were a very small number of folks that were on Twitter. It wasn't like 200 million people. It is really, really difficult to get large numbers of people to agree on many, many things. And I think that we are living in an era of yes, it's fractured and polluted social media, but I think it's when we talk about the I don't know, community. What is it? Not the global village, but there's these different phrases about like everybody gathers around the
Yeah, the
same.
global commons,
Right,
or
right. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. That kind of thing. I think that we had a unique era, and Matthew says it's roughly a decade, where quote he says Twitter hosted what is lightheartedly called the national conversation. I guess maybe he's actually quoting Megan McArdle in her Washington Post article. But anyway, this article and articles like this, I have caused me to not just lament, oh man, Twitter's not back. Look, Twitter, the old Twitter, I don't think is coming back. And I don't think we're going to recreate a similar platform where most of the journalists of the world and so many different folks are on. For me and probably for Peggy and Jason too, I mean, I wasn't a witness or a participant in this ugliness of Twitter. I really saw it and experienced it as this thriving community of educators and a lot of early adopters and generous sharers and people who were, experimenting with things, doing things, but also helping each other out. It was just unbelievably wonderful to be able to say, oh gosh, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Is there anybody that can help? And you would get answers. And it was really amazing. I think that we're going to have smaller networks, but the other big thought that I have here is that I think we need to be encouraging and intentionally working to help people connect on these other platforms, because I've read elsewhere and I'm trying to think of what it is. The founder of Flipboard, Mike McHugh, has a great podcast, and talks a lot about this, the federated social media world, the Fediverse. It takes evidently a lot of money and a lot of work to make a social media platform, a microblogging platform, not only stable, but also really user friendly. And Jason has experienced this. Mastodon is not the most user friendly environment. I mean, you have to start by finding a server and figuring out what that means and then setting that up. And then how do you follow folks? And it's not just like click, click, click. You have to wrangle with it in order to get it to work. But Blue Sky and Mastodon now are both federated. Mastodon is the completely open source solution. I just think that social media is not going to go back nostalgically to where it was, back in the day with Twitter, like 20 years ago, I guess, or whatever, 2007, I guess, is when I got on. So it's over 15 years ago. It's not going to go back to that day, but that doesn't mean we don't have tremendously powerful and wonderful tools that we can use to connect and to learn together and to build community together. And I really do believe that both digital distributed community as well as local face-to-face community, they're both super, super important. And I think that's a really good place to invest time and energy and money in as we can in the spheres that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely couldn't agree more. And it's funny too. I mean, I generally had a good experience on Twitter too. There was a point of which I did feel like that if you the live Twitter chats, which like they're trying to respark them on Blue Sky, and it's just not working out. And part of that is that I do think there's some cynicism about any of these platforms lasting, and so that's a to be in the same hour every week to talk to the random group that shows up is a real commitment, right? But one of the things that I was experiencing with Twitter chats, especially before it was only 140 characters, was that you could talk about really light issues in that way, but if you wanted any nuance in your argument, that wasn't the place to do it. Right. And, I remember getting into a bit of a snit a couple of times with folks over, admittedly silly topics like the merits of advanced placement classes or that sort of thing. But the bottom line is that those uh, we do have a technology driven and dominant society, and inside of that society you do need places for people to come and talk and connect. And I think Twitter's argument is that I guess I should probably call it X's argument under Elon Musk, is that it's a free speech absolutist model. Of course, that didn't seem to really be true if you disagreed with Mr. Musk on some pieces. I think that's been largely rectified, and that's not happening as aggressively anymore. People being banned for disagreeing with the guy that owns the place. But I do think that it's been a real loss for education, and that tech savvy teachers and people looking to genuinely connect with people outside of their immediate circle, there's just no place to universally do that anymore. And I don't think we'll ever have a
Yeah.
Twitter, like platform again to take it full circle.
But I think we really need to be working towards that idea of building community and building larger communities of like-minded educators. I mean, it's of all kinds of educators, but educators that want to share ideas, that want to I don't know, man, just discovering good ideas and new ideas and being able to, benefit from hanging out with other people's brains. There's so many people in this
Yeah.
world that are so much smarter than I am and smarter in different ways and yes, there's YouTube and there's all these different ways to learn. But I know that you're really invested in LinkedIn. Jason, have you paid for LinkedIn yet? Or are you still like a free user?
I am paying for LinkedIn now, and it's way more money a month than I should be paying for it. But it does give me a lot of intelligence, including who's sniffing around my account. It's not universal that it will tell you. There's still some hierarchy in that amongst those that pay for advanced LinkedIn, and I am paying for the bare minimum. And part of it is you have to promise you're not using it to find find employees, because you're supposed to pay a different level for that, I think. But yeah, and I do spend probably about a half an hour every day on LinkedIn, 20-30 minutes split between the work day and then outside the work day. But Peggy, I might have seen you sniffing around my account, yes. And it's a really interesting location, because I do think that that they are largely work centered conversations. I absolutely like to see the different point of views, but it is a very curated piece, because people tend to be much more buttoned up on LinkedIn than they would be elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so interesting deciding where we share and what we share
Yeah.
and how we decide to make those decisions. So, do you think that your posts are amplified wider because of the result of you paying on LinkedIn?
They might be. I do. I still haven't really figured out which content. I mean, it's not like my goal there is to go viral, right? Because that's not why I'm on there. And I will say, it's a real opportunity for me to amplify Montana voices to the part of my group that is more national in nature, because of the work that I do at the national level in virtual learning. It's also an opportunity for me to, share polished stuff. I wouldn't put it seems more formal than a blog for me. So I try to make sure that when I do post longer form stuff on LinkedIn, that it's a really polished article. But in fact, this is a kind of a good segue to AI. I have also found that if you're looking for a curmudgeon to be partners with, that it's also a great location for that, right? Because there is a lot of I wouldn't go as far as saying bullying, but there is there are camps on LinkedIn across all the different educational philosophies for sure. Pro distance learning, anti distance learning, pro technology, anti technology, and now AI. That there are some very distinct camps that I do think are forming on LinkedIn. I like to see a diverse group of views. It's the reason why I read um, news media from across the political spectrum, because I like to think about it in different contexts to challenge my assumptions. Um, but yeah, it's certainly an interesting phenomenon, and I do get less, I don't know, out of LinkedIn because it is mostly right? And so it's relatively little, relatively little politics. Usually, yes, a lot of self promotion, but that's okay. That was true of all the social media platforms, and so yeah, it's been a good place for me to go for my professional interests.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I would value any feedback, of course, that anybody has about our show or the thoughts, but also just about social media platforms, because obviously there's a lot of folks on Facebook, a lot of people on LinkedIn, but the algorithms themselves have a huge impact on visibility and connections. And I still do long for those days with blogs and longer form writing and comments that we would have on blog posts and things like that. And that world is not gone. That the world of being able to write your own blog and or newsletter or whatever is still, there's still lots of opportunities for that.
Uh,
So
Well, and if you're an A-lister on LinkedIn, I am not. I am probably like a B- lister. I mean, there will be some very nice and aggressive conversation back and forth on issues. If you, I check out Ethan Mollick every day from the Wharton School. In part because he does post really interesting things about AI, but also that he has a large enough following that he's going to get a discussion when he posts something on LinkedIn, and I love that. That's something that's useful to me, and certainly something that I want to I want to review. But Substack is interesting in part because I also don't see as much discussion going on Substacks. That usually will get 3 or 4 comments, but it's usually 2 to 3 absolutely totally with you, you're so right, you're so awesome, and then 1 or 2 like you're so off base, you're such an idiot, and not a lot of dialogue back and forth, right?
yeah.
And that dialogue, I think, it remains a very important part of the kind of social realm of social media.
And in part, I mean, publishers and creators on LinkedIn or on Substack get to say, do you want to allow for, free subscribers to comment or restrict that to subscribers only? And anyway, there's all that. So, all right, sir. Well, we got about 15 minutes left. We need your AI perspective. So what would you like to
Sure.
share?
Well, it actually relates really well to what we just talked about. So MIT released a study a couple of weeks ago, and it has been being tossed around LinkedIn, and I have searched for it elsewhere, but LinkedIn is um, pretty important for this discussion. But basically, MIT in their media lab did a study about the cognitive effects of using a large language model. And I believe they were specifically using ChatGPT, and I would assume that it's a modern a version of it, like 4.0. And the idea was that they broke the students up. There was I'm sorry, the participants up, I should say, because it wasn't all students. There's 54 of them. They were, I think, like age like 20 to 40 or 18 to 38 or something like that, and they were recruited from universities around the region: MIT, Harvard, Tufts, and it was everything from undergraduate students to postdocs to professionals that worked on these campuses. And they divided up the groups into 3 groups. There was an LLM group who was given access to ChatGPT. There was a search engine group that could use Google with all the AI features turned off. And then there was a brain only group that were given no tools to use and just did it alone. And the treatment, I guess, was, or I guess the what they were doing was they were writing an essay, and they divided the participants into three groups, one of those three groups, and they were given a choice of an SAT style prompt. And so the LLM users got to use ChatGPT. The search engine group got to use Google, and then brain only group just used their own knowledge. And they did interviews, and they also did EEG recordings during the essays to measure, I guess, brain activity, right?
Which I think is fascinating, because I have wondered when we're going to be doing that
Yeah.
with even more visibility. But yeah, it apparently just was like, how active is your brain, and let's compare to, others in different control groups or experimental conditions.
Well, and the results were pretty stunning. Most of the LLM participants didn't deeply engage in the task. Many just copy and pasted the default ChatGPT result with no editing or no cognitive effort. Those essays they created were homogeneous, which means they were largely the same, which you would expect if they were just copying and pasting from the LLM. And also in the post interviews, they didn't really remember much of the essay itself. They couldn't even quote the essay they supposedly had written, and in a lot of cases, just copy and pasted from ChatGPT. And then also, the EEG data confirmed that there was reduced cognitive engagement with the LLM group, and much less neural activity during that process. And some of those essays were rated well by graders. They used both AI and human graders, but those that were in LLM or the LLM group stood out less in originality, and again, more homogeneous results, right? So this study gets released, and of course the headlines are ChatGPT makes you dumb, ChatGPT decreases cognitive activity, and wide varieties of this, and then everyone who was super anti-AI, jumped onto social media and said, "Aha! We've been telling you this all along." I called it aha-ism and shared one of my favorite George Costanza memes where he says, "Aha!" And the first thing that I did when I saw this was download the PDF, and
Which is
then
206
yeah,
pages long, by the
yeah,
way.
it's a real commitment. And if I didn't have a couple plane flights to be on last week, of which I couldn't get my way onto the Wi-Fi, I'm not sure if I would have read the 206 pages either. But I mean, the study did point out these differences, right? But the reason why I find this amusing is because there have been 3 or 4 studies out of Africa about the possibility of AI agent tutors tutoring that have had some pretty stunning results, right? Showing that students can make up years in just a couple of months, and how how there's a lot of potential with these large language models, and anytime anyone cites those studies or talks about the potential with those studies as an example, you hear all this hand wringing about it was a very small end, and the treatment group received things that the control group didn't receive, beyond the access to the language tutor, and all sorts of criticisms. And to be clear, I had a lot of this. So did Dr. Fryer in his research core. You are taught to pick apart studies, right? That's the skill that you, if you're not going to go off and research yourself, which I haven't had a chance to be part of a research team or write a study since my dissertation, but one of the things they do teach you is that most studies have holes in them, so you should find them before you trust them, right? But then the same folks that have been criticizing those studies out of Africa, and saying all these things that were found, or that it found that your brain rots, and quoting the TechCrunch article, which TechCrunch is not a legitimate source for breaking apart research. They missed, clearly hadn't read the study, right? Those people that were posting these headlines minutes after MIT released a study, certainly not true. But they missed out on a really interesting fact that's dug deep down into the study. They also did a fourth writing session where they switched around the group that used their brain only and the group that did LLM, they were exposed to. And they didn't even give the fourth session to the Google group. They just did it with the LLM group and the brain group. And they found that most of the students that wrote in the session 4 had higher memory recalls. This is they used their brains for sessions 1, 2, and 3, and used an LLM for number 4. They had higher memory recall than all of the groups. They remembered more of what they'd previously written. Their neuroactivity increased significantly across all of the EEG frequency bands, indicating that the distributed cognitive effort was greater than those in the original LLM piece. They did not revert to a novice state despite switching tools. Their brain resembled like a hybrid cognitive model, right? And they were using LLMs as a tool and not like a vending machine, right? Which is the metaphor that I use for this now. Nobody talks about that part, right? And that I don't know anyone in the open to AI or pro AI space that thinks that we should be giving students essay topics and then having them use ChatGPT to write them. No one believes that, right?
Yeah.
They believe in what session 4 students were doing, which is that there are core skills that we need to teach students. And I don't think it's a problem to say you can't use ChatGPT for this essay, or here's how I want you to use ChatGPT. But what the study also showed, right, was that there was a significant number of individuals that were writing with their brain the first 3 times through. They got access to a large language model, and then used it to great effect, right, with very little diminishment of cognitive work, and more importantly, they remembered the essay and had better outcomes. And that's where I think we're getting lost in this argument, right? We're throwing the headlines back and forth to each other. We're not actually, engaging in the argument here.
Did you happen to put this article into Notebook LM and give it that kind of a prompt after you've read it, or did you do any Notebook LM with it?
I might have. I know I do have a research notebook LLM where I stick studies like this.
Yeah.
But and I did give it to, I think, Claude at one point too, and had it look over another piece of writing that I had been working on, that's probably the core of a presentation, to see if it could contribute. But no, it is the best answer to your question.
So lots of fascinating things about this one. I like that they called the non-AI using group the brain only group. But I do like that the session 4, group 4, a lot with the hybridized version.
Yep.
It occurs to me, and I'm not going to be in a position, I anticipate doing professional development, at the start of this next school year or whatever, but it would be very, very interesting to use some kind of easy survey to basically ask teachers in the room to self-segregate based upon their existing perceptions about AI. I think that we have large numbers of teachers that are very anti-AI use. I also suspect that many of those who are strongly anti-AI, or maybe we could call them AI Luddites, may not be very experienced AI users themselves. And I think it would be very interesting in discussions around topics focused on AI to kind of know those sorts of camps that people sort of come into the conversation from. So thank you for bringing this article. I've to our attention, and I've seen some posts that you have made about this, and I haven't taken the time to read the article excuse me, or really to get in depth with it. But I mean, look, getting your doctorate and studying academic research, it is challenging beyond, looking at the headlines. And, to Jason's point about the quick hot takes that were being thrown around, as soon as this is published. I find it fascinating that we're looking at brain scans and then we're making assumptions of, I mean, the theta waves and all the other stuff that's in here. Like, okay, how many neuroscientists are I don't know how. We know that brain activity is good, but I don't know that we are at a level of sophistication of understanding exactly what neural activity, oh, good, look at that. That was critical thinking. There was creativity. I mean, I maybe neuroscientists can do that, but I don't think that we're there yet. But the idea of a hybrid approach, and that as teachers, we really have to be rethinking assessment, and we
Yeah.
have to, especially if we have been relying upon take home writing activities. I mean, we have to be rethinking what we're doing in terms of assessment if we're wanting to get an accurate snapshot of, what students are able to independently do.
Yeah, totally. And the bottom line too is that, like, a lot of the people that were screaming aha, were professors at studying education at universities, right? And I've even seen some comments, and I would name names here, but to be honest, I don't really want to pick on folks that I probably if I wouldn't put a comment in their post. But someone was talking about how good VO is at creating videos, VO3, the Google model, and it's stunning. I mean, you can create 8 seconds of video that are pretty great, or at least quite high quality. And I know that in part because I don't stick in regular stuff; I stick in weird stuff. In fact, today I was showing it off during a little internal meeting we had talking about AI tools, and I asked it to have a dog DJ at a chicken rave. And so there it was, a rave in a farm with chickens dancing, and a boxer, with headphones on, spinning tunes up the DJ booth. But the thing the person was commenting on is how good they were at creating images of kids, and I think it were kids in a playground or something. And the person that jumped on said, "Well, the reason why it's so good at creating images of kid is because um, uh, uh, it's trained on all these, and I can't remember. I think it's CSAM. Is that the acronym of
Right. Bad stuff.
yeah, bad stuff regarding children imagery.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not true. And in fact, if you go and look up what had happened there, was some CSAM in the training data of some of these large languages? Yeah, it was. And they recognized their error, and they fished out the information, and they worked with advocacy groups to make sure that the models lack that. Is that the reason why that those models are accurate depicting children? No. Like, that's an unnecessary panic, and especially since it's not even close to true.
Yeah. Peggy's commenting in the chat about, the brain only group and hard to imagine. We rolled out as a school something called the lockdown browser for iPad this last year. And so because we use Canvas for our learning management system, when we use a new quiz, it can't be an old quiz, or this is how it was in the spring. You can use the lockdown browser with a new quiz, and when students start that, and you can limit it to in class and by IP address and time and have a passcode and all this stuff. But basically, I can give a quiz to my kids in class, and their device, their iPad, cannot go to any other window, cannot open anything else. That's it. Yep, it's the lockdown browser. So that would actually be interesting, Jason. I think there's some, I don't know. I'm thinking about publishing maybe some stuff this next year. And I'm curious, like, how many schools are using Chromebooks? How many are using iPads? How many are using other kinds of laptops? And of course, what are they doing with them? Is anybody creating and publishing publicly outside the boundaries of the learning management system? But lockdown browsers, I would hypothesize, are going to be hugely utilized, especially in high schools in the coming academic year. And that's going to be a real big thing that ed tech companies, and of course, whoever your LMS is, if it's Canvas or someone else, is going to provide that. But the licensing for that, I think that's going to probably be a gold mine, because trying to have brain only
Yeah.
guarantees of student assessment is going to be a big deal.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, sir, we are over the top of the hour. Would you like to do another AI article, or should we geek of the week it?
Let's go ahead and geek of the weekend. Otherwise, we're going to be here till midnight.
Okay. All right. Well, what do you got for us this week?
Yeah, I just want to share a great AI platform that I ran into that actually is one of the best I've used so far. It's called Witsy, WITSY. And for those of you that are experimenting with local AI, so AI that runs on your machine, especially if you're running a Mac with Apple Silicon on it, or if you're using AI via an API. So you're using OpenRouter or one of the many AI keys. It's a wonderful platform for hosting all those things locally, and adds a lot of interesting things above it.
My Chrome identifies that website as dangerous, but I think it's because it's not HTTPS.
Oh, well, and that's doing that to me too now.
Huh.
Um, yeah, my regular Chrome does that too, for a reason that I don't really understand. But um, I've had a good time with Witsy, but maybe wait until they get their SSL certificate back.
Yeah, maybe they just have a temporary issue. All right. Well, at the risk of oversharing like I usually do, here's three quick ones. Alan Levine, Cogdog, as I know Jason and Peggy know, is one of the most innovative educational sharers in the history of the world. He uses Pinboard. And so I was seeing his Mastodon posts that automatically cross post thanks to RSS and some fancy if this, then that formula or something. And anyway, I set up a Pinboard. Pinboard is social bookmarking. I haven't used Digo or Delicious Bookmarks for over a decade. Pinboard's $22 a year. It is super cool. Everything has an RSS feed. I've got the bookmarklet on Safari, so my phone and iPad and in Chrome. And there you go. Wes is saving social bookmarks again. Next one is a little link. I've got 2 workshops I'm teaching this week. This one's called Creating Cool Websites. One of the things you can see if you scroll down is some really amazing infographics that ChatGPT helped me create. Our first project is a favorite animal website. And so just a great summary with some very cute little tiger, rabbit, turtle, and dog. But I mean, I created this thing in 2 minutes, right? And then we're starting our new project where we're doing a city travel website. And I wanted the key elements of that to be there. I also created an infographic on types of media: text, images, animation, links, video, audio. So if you're not using AI tools, and I would say ChatGPT 4.0 is what I'm using, give it a shot. It is absolutely amazing. And the ability to visually communicate concisely and creatively with students, with an audience, with teachers, whoever you're trying to communicate with, it's an important skill. And I really think that AI tools can do a lot for us with that. And then lastly, Booklet Creator. Shelly, my wife, is teaching a couple engineering design classes for students, and she wanted to have a printable booklet that kids could, use and write on and have. And if you've ever tried to do this with a PDF and a printer, that it doesn't fold right. If you were trying to make a booklet, but you just go into Booklet Creator. If you are doing 18 pages or less, it's completely free. You can license it if you want to help the creator, or if you want to do more than 18 pages. But Shelly has had such a great experience with this that she's like, I want to do this for, more of my science units during the year. So it's awesome. It's available. It's a free download for Mac and Windows. It is called Booklet Creator. The website is bookletcreator.com. So, Dr. Neiffer, where can folks find you when you are not here on Wednesday night, illuminating us about the latest in AI research?
Best place to find me is LinkedIn, or you can see my website, aicentrist.com.
There you go. And I am at westfryer.com. I'm kind of all over with social media, but when you go to westfryer.com, you can click connect and go to my after page. And I've got lots of little icons there that show how ridiculously prolific my sharing can sometimes be. So this has been the EdTech Situation Room. We are an almost weekly podcast on Wednesday nights, coming to you from the state of Montana and the state of North Carolina. Thank you so much, Peggy George, for joining us live. It is great to have you with us. I know we've had a couple other live viewers that have been there. And if you have been listening to the show in any shape or form, either on video, YouTube, where they're all archived, or you've gone to our website or Substack, let us know. Reach out and contact us. We hope you stay savvy, stay safe, and see us again on another episode of the EdTech Situation Room. Good night, everybody.